Hi, so this is a 2008 Jeep Commander 4.7 litre V8. This is not the Hemi version, this is the 4.7 litre PowerTech. It's the upgraded one from 2008 onwards, which has got more horsepower than the original 4.7 litre. And I'm going to show you now some tips and tricks for removing the passenger side exhaust manifold. And my exhaust manifold has a leak at the gasket, so when we're replacing that, I'm going to show you how to get this thing out. So the first thing you need to realize is that the instructions in the workshop manual provided by Chrysler are incorrect. They don't help at all. I'll show you what you need to remove to start. So the first thing you've got to remove is the water reservoir. This has a bolt over here which won't come out. You'll have to cut this off. So you'll see I've cut this off with a Dremel. And here is the Dremel bit. And here is my Dremel. Next you've got to remove the air filter box and the air filter lower box. Then you've got to remove the crankcase ventilation conduit. Next you've got to remove the heater hoses. Now the manual says that you've got to remove this accessory drive belt, but you do not need to remove that. It also says you must remove the air conditioning compressor. You do not need to remove the air conditioning compressor. I've also removed the lower radiator hose so that I could drain the cooling system. But I don't think you have to remove that actually. So once you removed all these things, there's also a cable here which I've pushed out of the way. But you can get your hand in like that, and using that action over here, you can see there's a space where you can actually work. So this whole area here is where you can actually work with your arm. You can put your whole hand in there, and then you can get your wrenches in there to get the various bolts off. Now before you start this job, you must get one of these. This is an air-powered socket wrench. You do get the ones which are battery powered, but they've got a bulky battery over here, so it's very difficult to use in a small space. So the air powered one is the one you're going to need. You're also going to need a 1/2 inch socket. Now this 1/2 inch socket is actually cut down to have the perfect length to actually fit over these bolts. So you don't really want to try use one that's longer than this, and if it's shorter, then it's not going to fit over the bolts. So for instance, here's one of the bolts. So this has got to go over like that. Now, if you can't cut one of these things down, I don't know what you're going to do, because if they're too long, then there's not enough space inside there to actually use it. The other thing is you need a 10mm to get the rest of the bolts, because so here is the full gamut of bolts. So these ones are the ones for the exhaust wire pipe actually bolts onto the manifold with these bolts. And then these smaller ones are a 10mm, and these are where the heat shield doesn't need to actually get bolted onto top of this. And then you've got these smaller ones have these little nuts which go on, which are also difficult to get off. Now to get the wire pipe, you need a very long extension and a socket over there. I think it's a 15 or a 16 millimeter. This is a 16. Yeah, this is a 16 millimeter. And those come up quite easily with an impact. And then once you've got all the bolts out, this thing actually comes out. They say you're supposed to lower it below the engine, but that doesn't actually work. You actually bring it out here where the filter box was. The air filter box was here, and you actually bring it out this side. And that works quite well. So here is the exhaust manifold. Now, apparently this exhaust manifold is different from the 2007 and earlier ones for the same engine. I don't know why that is. It's a different part number. I mean, you look at the aftermarket ones, they say it's for up to 2007 and not for the 2008. So you actually cannot buy these because Mopar stopped making them, and you can't get them in the aftermarket. So if you break one of these, you're going to have to get it welded up, or you have to get it braids or something like that if it's got a crack in it. This one seems to be in perfect condition except for one problem, and that is that if I take a straight edge and I put it on here, there's quite a bit of rocking of the straight edge. So this is not flat at all, and I need to machine this down. So the next step is going to be machining this flat. Everything else about it seems really nice. There's no serious corrosion on it. There's just surface rust. So it's a very well maintained engine bay with virtually no corrosion or damage anywhere. Now I've already cleaned up the surface of this with a Dremel and one of these little polishing wheels. And this is a 400 grit polishing wheel. So, but that of course doesn't help you because this isn't flat. So this will still have to be machined. Now where it was leaking was actually through the gasket. The gasket had failed, and you actually see where it failed in the corner over here. So it was actually leaking exhaust gas out the thing. Now I found this with a smoke test. I went to an exhaust place and specifically asked them before I went there if they had if they had smoke testing equipment, and they ran the smoke tester for like 20 minutes to try and find where the leak was, and they were able to eventually see a small whiff of smoke coming out this area. So that's how I know this was leaking. It so happens that the driver's side is not leaking, so I'm replacing the passenger sides only. There will be no video about the driver's side exhaust manifold. I can't actually mount this because this is so high. It's going to actually knock over the dial indicator, because these two are much higher than these two. So I've made this one and this one level. So there it is, all mounted up in the vise. I've used two pieces of aluminum angle over here and here to clamp, and it seems to clamp quite well. So we're going to see if there's any movement. Hopefully it's not going to move while I'm machining it. I'm going to take very, very small cuts, probably less than 1/2,000. Okay, so we've done a couple of passes and it's just starting to touch. You can see where it's touching there, some on the corner over there. And it's not even making a sound, so it seems like it's cutting very well. This is my carbide cutter. It's not specifically for cast iron, but I'm only taking off 1,000ths at a time. So with a feed rate of 1,000 per tooth. So if I go slowly, I'm sure it's going to work well. So here's my little program. So I've used a relative positioning. So each time I run the program, it goes down 1,000ths. So here it is doing the pass with very, very slow feed, 7 inches per minute, and 500 rotations per second, and there's 6 teeth. So here's where it's starting to make contact, and it doesn't even make a sound. So I've done about 10 passes, so it's cleaned up most of the 2 center exhaust ports. It hasn't even touched the outer ones. It's just started to touch this one. I heard it touching, I can't see where. It's done about 10 passes, so this is about 10,000ths. So I'm just going to keep going. So it's almost cleaned up, just the ends of it here, and the two middle ones are completely cleaned up. So probably a couple more thousandths. So I think we're done. You can see there's a little bit of chatter there, but actually you can hardly even feel that with your finger. It's so slight. I didn't clean up all the way to the end. I didn't think that was necessary. It's good enough the way it is. But this is excellent finish. It's extremely smooth to the touch. So this is the finished result. So now I can work on putting everything back together. So there's two more tips you must be aware of when installing. The first is run the car and heat up the exhaust manifolds and then let it cool down and then retighten all the bolts. I think this is a good recommendation. The second thing is that the factory service manual says that you mustn't completely tighten the nuts that hold the heat shield on. If you tighten the nuts that hold the heat shield will actually crack because it's stainless steel and it expands and contracts. So what you must do, you must tighten the nuts and back them off a quarter turn, and that's how you must leave it.